My son told me, in front of his colleagues at his own promotion dinner, that I was embarrassing him. I folded my napkin, said, "You are right, Luke," and took a car home. He thought that was the end of it. 4 months later, I was sitting in a federal courtroom, and he was standing on the other side of the glass, and I watched his face the moment he understood exactly what I had been doing since I walked out of that restaurant. If this story is one you needed today, stay with me. And go ahead and hit subscribe before you move on. There are more like this one coming. My name is Willow Nelson, 68 years old, Savannah, Georgia. I live in the same house Thomas and I shared for 22 years. The magnolia he planted the year we moved in is taller than the roofline now. Some mornings I stand on the porch with my coffee and just look at it. Thomas had no idea it would get that big. Neither did I. He passed 3 years ago, and for a long time after that, I moved through my days like I was trying to take up as little space as possible. I am done with that. I want you to know that from the start. 35 years at First Coastal Bank as a financial fraud investigator. Not a job that gets a reaction at dinner. Nobody leans in. But it was mine, and it got into my bones the way only long work does. I tracked wire transfers across 12-hour stretches. I mapped shell companies back to the real people behind them. I sat across from men who lied to my face with complete confidence, and I found the thread every single time. Twice I worked directly with FBI financial crimes units on cases that ended in federal indictments. I retired early when Thomas was diagnosed. 4 years of caregiving, then 3 years alone on Gwinnett Street. Somewhere in that quiet, I started to lose the feel of what I actually was. Have you ever gone long enough without using something that you start to wonder if you still have it? Luke is my son, 41, commercial real estate, lives downtown with his wife Ella in one of those buildings with a rooftop and someone at the front desk around the clock. I never once held any of that against him. What I did, without being asked and without expecting a thing for it, was keep a quiet eye on their finances. Tax filings every April. Insurance contracts I flagged when I spotted clauses that could cost them later. Investment summaries Luke forwarded to me every few months without much thought. I went through all of it at this kitchen table, usually past midnight, coffee going cold beside me. He called the next afternoon, got the rundown, said thanks, and moved on. He never once asked how long it took. It genuinely did not occur to him to wonder. Then came the Tuesday evening of Luke's promotion dinner. He had made partner. The firm held a dinner at a restaurant downtown, the kind with cloth napkins and a sommelier who materializes without being called. I was glad to be there. I was proud of him, genuinely. About halfway through the meal, one of his colleagues, a man named Davis, started describing a commercial property deal he was weighing. The structure of the numbers Davis laid out had a pattern I had seen before, the same layering I had flagged in 3 separate fraud cases over my career. I leaned toward Luke and said quietly that the deal structure was worth a second look before he put his name anywhere near it. Luke set his wine glass down on the tablecloth. He did not bother lowering his voice. He said, "Mom, you are retired. You are not here professionally. Please do not do this." He said I had a habit of making every room about my expertise and that it was getting old. He said Davis was a colleague, not a suspect, and I needed to learn the difference. The table went quiet. Davis looked at his plate. Ella looked at her phone. I looked at Luke, and I saw something I had been not seeing for a while. He was not embarrassed by what I said. He was embarrassed by me, by the simple fact of me sitting there, still knowing things. I folded my napkin and set it beside my plate. I said, "You are right, Luke. Enjoy your evening." I took a car home. I did not cry on the way back. I just watched the city move past the window and thought about the last time I had been in a room where what I knew mattered to anyone. Ah, and here is the part I have turned over in my mind more times than I can count. Davis called Luke 4 months later. The deal had fallen apart. The structure I flagged had been exactly what I thought it was. Luke never said a word to me about it. Not one word. I stopped everything, quietly, and with no announcement. No more April tax reviews. No more flagging the insurance clauses. When Luke called in the spring and asked if I could look over his filing before the deadline, I told him it did not work with my schedule right now. He paused, asked if something was wrong. I said nothing was wrong and suggested he ask his financial advisor, since that was what the man was there for. I was not cold when I said it, just matter of fact. That was the whole call. Could you have done that? Said it that plainly, without explaining yourself or softening it. 3 weeks later, I was at the post office, dropping off a birthday card for my neighbor's daughter, when I nearly walked into Edna coming out the door. Edna lives 4 houses down, 73 years old, retired librarian, and she had been crying in the recent past in the specific way people cry when they have been doing it alone for a while and are hoping nobody can tell. I asked her what was going on. She told me, standing right there between the mail slots and a corkboard covered in handwritten notices, that she had lost $38,000 to a man she met online. He told her he was a contractor working a job overseas. He asked for the money in small pieces over several months, through wire transfers she could no longer trace. I had known Edna for 11 years. She brought food to my door the week Thomas died. I told her to come to my kitchen that afternoon and bring everything she had, every email, every transfer receipt, every screen name he used. We sat at my kitchen table for 5 hours. I traced every wire, mapped every account alias, documented every gap in the timeline where the trail had been deliberately obscured. Edna sat across from me and watched the way you watch someone do something you did not know another person could do. This is what I know how to do. Not folding napkins at someone else's celebration. This. Edna brought me to Emily, the director of Savannah Senior Legal Aid. Young woman, maybe early 30s, running a small office on willpower and a budget I would not wish on anyone. Emily had more open cases than she had hours in the week. I told her I did not need a salary. I needed files. She looked at me the way people look when something they were not counting on just walked through the door. She pulled out the first folder the next morning. The weeks found a shape. I left each day carrying questions I had not answered yet, which is a completely different weight than the emptiness I had been dragging around for 3 years. One afternoon, while I was rebuilding a transaction chain on my monitor, I noticed something that made me stop moving entirely. An account structure, a layering pattern. One I had seen before, not in a client file, but in documents I had sat with at my own kitchen table. The beneficial owner listed in the instrument was not Luke's name, but the signature on the authorization was his. Luke had used my name as a reference on a financial document without asking me. He had assumed I would never be in a room where something like that would cross my desk again. Oh, I sat with that for a long time without moving. I did not call him. I just let my mind do what it has always done with unfinished files. It kept pulling at it, and I understood then why he had silenced me at that dinner table. It was not about embarrassment. It was about keeping me out of rooms where I might eventually see something he could not explain. He was not cruel. He was frightened, and he had pushed the one person who might have helped him quietly out of reach so she could not see his face when the numbers came due. What do you do when you understand that the person who hurt you was mostly just afraid of being seen? The larger case built over 4 months. 14 elderly victims, one coordinated investment fraud scheme, $1.87 million taken through a web of falsified documents. Emily and I worked with Joshua, my former colleague from the FBI Financial Crimes Division. We built the paper trail piece by piece. A portion of the funds was recovered. The WSAV Channel 3 contacted the center about running a segment. Emily wanted me on camera. I told her I had never needed the attention. She said the people who were robbed needed to see the face of someone who had fought for them. I thought about Edna standing outside the post office, trying to look like she had not been crying. I said yes. 2 weeks after the segment aired, a private investigations firm out of Atlanta called. Senior fraud consultant position, $270,000 a year. The offer had one condition: I would need to step back from volunteer work. Since it created a conflict with their client list, I told them that condition was my answer. Their clients could hire the best attorneys in the state of Georgia. Mine could not afford to lose one more dollar. That was the entire conversation. Then came the subpoena. A federal case had opened around the investment scheme, and I was called as an expert witness. I did not think much about the logistics until as I walked into the courthouse on a Wednesday morning and looked through the glass partition into the hallway and saw Luke standing there with two men in suits, holding a folder, waiting on a meeting that had nothing to do with my testimony. He saw me at the same moment. I watched him go still in a way I recognized. It was the stillness of someone who has just understood the full shape of something they thought they had managed. His right hand tightened around the folder. He did not look away. Neither did I. Then the bailiff called the room to order, and I went in and did my job the way I have done it for 35 years. Clearly, without drama, without anything extra. Afterward, in the corridor, Luke was there. He did not have anything prepared. He just stood there and said, "Mom, I did not know." I looked at him and said, "You knew enough to move me out of the way, Luke." That is where we have to start. He did not have anything to say to that. That was new. The months after that were not dramatic. They looked more like arithmetic. Luke hired an attorney and disclosed the document issue voluntarily, which was the right call. He and Ella moved to a smaller place on the north side. The second car went. He called me 4 times with nothing to say and hung up. The 5th time he left a message. It was short. He said he was sorry. He said he really was. I listened to it standing at the kitchen window with the phone in my hand, looking at the magnolia. I saved it. I did not call back that day. I also finally sat down with an estate attorney and updated everything I had let sit since Thomas died. Long overdue. Then one afternoon, Edna came into the office with a bakery box and told me she had recovered $19,000. She was taking her granddaughter out west to see the Grand Canyon in the fall. She hugged me and said I had given her back something she thought was simply gone. I stood in that hug and did not say much. I knew exactly what she meant because I had been looking for the same thing myself for 3 years. The following month, I started a free workshop at the center. How to recognize financial fraud before it gets to your door. The first Thursday, 11 people came and sat in folding chairs and listened. By the 4th session, the room was past capacity, and someone had dragged in chairs from the hallway. I remember a woman named Gloria, maybe 70, who came up afterward and said she had almost wired money the week before to someone using the exact pattern I had described. She stood there with her coat still on and said, "I almost did it." I just looked at her and said, "But you didn't." That is the whole point. When I got home after that 4th session, I called Luke. We talked for 26 minutes. It was the first conversation in a long time where neither of us was carrying something we were trying not to show the other. I have not forgiven everything. I want to be straight about that. But I opened a door. The lock is mine. Luke is still my son. I am also still myself. He gets both of those things from here forward, or he gets neither. That is not a threat. It is just the truth of how I intend to stand. So before you go, I want to ask you something. Has someone ever used your silence against you, counted on it, built their plans around the fact that you would stay quiet? Tell me in the comments. I think more people have been in this hallway than they have ever said out loud. And if this story found you at the right time, the subscribe button is right there.